Travis Small. I'm the Transportation Division Manager. So what that means is any of the major arterial roadway projects or roadway projects in general that go through the city generally come through me, and I get to oversee those projects. It's part of the things I love to do. Engineering Construction Department, we're responsible for all municipal projects that are done by the city. So any construction contract, any engineering contract, design contract runs through our department. We manage those contracts with the design firms and the construction contracts once they go to construction. We perform in-house designs as needed. So when a project's identified, if it's a smaller type project, and one example is we did some sidewalk down on South Elm recently that our in-house staff, in fact, one of my project engineers worked on that and designed it. We did that design in-house as opposed to taking it outside to an outside design firm. So smaller projects we'll do in-house. The larger projects we try to farm out to engineering firms or consultants to handle those, and we manage those. Bidding of the contracts. So once the design is complete, we'll advertise and bid the project and award the contract through council, and then we'll manage the construction contract. So let's see, other responsibilities we have in-house are right-of-way acquisitions. We have a right-of-way agent, so any project that we design that requires right-of-way, our right-of-way agent will handle that, do the negotiations with the landowners, and prepare that for acquisitions. Loans. A lot of our loans, or all of our loans, basically go through the water and wastewater division. So any water and wastewater project typically has loan money tied to it through the OWRB, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund are examples of that. Grants, a couple of examples of grant projects are STP projects, which are surface transportation projects, roadway projects in other words. TAP grants, which is a transportation alternative program. A lot of times that's sidewalks and trail projects, which usually run through my group. And then CDBG grants, which are community development block grants. So we do a lot of CDBG grant projects around the Rose District. Utility relocation coordination is also within our department. All of our projects that require utility relocations will coordinate that in-house with our staff and the utility departments. We have currently approximately 130 projects ongoing right now that's either in the planning, design, or construction phases. Ethan Edwards, our director, is sitting right here in the audience. He's the director of our engineering construction department. We have 5 divisions, 27 employees. Construction is overseen, the construction division is overseen by Tim Robbins. Almost every project that the engineering construction department handles goes eventually to the construction division, and Tim oversees that. That's municipal projects, but the construction division also oversees private developments. So there are certain aspects of the private developments that run through the construction division as well. Environmental, which is water and wastewater projects, that's Brandy Parks. She oversees that. Special projects, Charlie Bright. Charlie Bright oversees the vertical construction, so the Center for the Arts in the Rose District is an example of that. The Wart Home Memorial project was also overseen through Charlie's division. So parks projects are also handled through him.
3 and 7.
Fire Station 3 and 7. So stormwater division is Pat Wilson. Pat is the certified floodplain manager for the city of Broken Arrow, so all stormwater aspects run through him, whether they be municipal or private. So development work runs through him, but making sure that we're meeting all the requirements with respect to stormwater. So that will be the collection systems, detention facilities, you name it. And then myself, I'm the Transportation Division Manager, as I said, arterial roadway projects in general. All right, so our department, once a project's been identified, and that can be identified in numerous different ways. Citizens can bring projects to our attention. City council or the administration may have ideas of projects. Once we've identified a potential project, our division, our department will start looking into the project in general, and by that we need to scope it, figure out what the needs are, figure out what the costs are. So we start doing some estimation to determine what the project's going to cost, figure out all the needs for that project. We try to determine where the funding source is going to come from. If we have funds available immediately, like for instance, a traffic signal we might have monies already available through the streetlight fund that we can identify the project and start working on it immediately. If it's a potential bond project or a potential future project that we're going to identify in a new bond project, then we'll have to start the pre-planning process to get it scoped, find out what it's going to cost, and then get it planned for that future project. So it may take some time. So if we have federal requirements, that can tie some things to it that usually extends the period of time the project will take. So from beginning to end, if federal funds are tied to it, usually it takes longer than normal if we just have city funds tied to it. So at that point in time, once we've gotten through some of those aspects of the pre-project items, we start looking at a selection of a design firm. So that process can lead up to a qualifications-based selection process, which we solicit for requests for qualifications from firms. They submit that to us. We'll review those, narrow that down to a select few, and then do interviews to determine who the best option would be to design that project. As I said, it's qualifications-based. This is a little bit different than a construction project where state law says that we typically have to go with the lowest bid. This is not a lowest bid situation. This is qualifications based, okay? So we will then get the contract together with that consultant firm, start negotiating, get the scope, the budget, the timeline set, and then write the contract with them, get it routed through their firm for signatures, and then take it to council for possible approval. And all that has to go through our legal department to make sure it's all in good shape. And then once we get it executed with the city council, I'm going to talk a little bit more about a typical arterial roadway project, since that's my expertise, but basically we'll get that contract in place with the firm, and then we start the design phase. Design phase is typically on one of my roadway projects is a 30, 60, 100% design. So there's 3 different phases: conceptual, preliminary, and final. Conceptual being 30, preliminary being 60, final obviously being 100%. Now during that process, the conceptual phase, we'll start laying out the basic layout of the project, start identifying what roadway right-of-way needs we might have, start identifying what utilities might be affected, and then that will be submitted into our division, the transportation division, for review of the project. We'll go back and forth with a consultant firm with some comments and requirements if we see issues that need to be addressed. We'll send it back to the consulting firm. They'll work on preliminary design at that point, which will take it a step further in the design. The 30% design, or the conceptual design, is more of a 30,000 foot look at the project. As you get to preliminary, you start refining that, getting more detailed, and drilling down to the nuts and bolts of the project. They'll go through the preliminary design phase, resubmit it to us. We'll again review it. At that point in time, we should really have nailed down exactly what our right-of-way needs are, exactly what utilities are going to be affected. So as we step down the subcomponents of design, that's where you start seeing these right-of-way needs, identification and coordination, utility relocation needs. We start really getting at that point at the 60% design, knowing exactly what those needs are, and start coordination of that. Some other things that can affect this, especially if we have federal funds tied to this, the environmental clearance process. The environmental clearance process can be very timely, or very untimely, I should say. It takes a lot of time to get through that process. When you're having to deal with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, SHPO, SHPO, that's SHPO, that's the State Historic Preservation Office. So there's various aspects of that environmental clearance that can really slow the project down. So those are some aspects that will affect the timeline of the project. And then obviously, once we send the 60% plan review comments to them, the consultant firm will address those and then submit final plans. Once we get to final plans, then we can go to the advertisement and bid of the project. But that's the design process. That can usually takes about 12 months. Okay, so then we get to the right-of-way acquisition phase. Now, the right-of-way acquisition phase can start during the design phase. As I said, about 60% design, we should be knowing about what we need, but that usually right-of-way acquisition takes approximately 12 months plus. We start negotiating with those landowners. We've identified all the right-of-way that's necessary, all the temporary construction easements, drainage easements, sidewalk easements, those sort of things that are going to be required for that project. So we'll then start negotiations with those landowners. Our right-of-way agent will reach out to those landowners and identify what the project is, start talking to the landowner, see if that landowner might be willing to donate the land for the project, or if we're going to have to go back and forth with some offers. If we don't have to do, or if we get donations, we don't have to do appraisals. If we do have to purchase the land through the process, we will have to do appraisals, and that can add some time to it. So going through the offer, counter offer of the proposal, the completion of the legal documents. Once we've arrived in an agreement for the cost of the land that we need, we will then send the right-of-way documents to the landowner for them to execute, and then those come back to the city. The city will execute it, and then we file it with the county. At last resort, we will go to the condemnation process, and unfortunately that happens from time to time when we can't come to an agreement between the landowner and the city. If they're asking a tremendous amount for the land that's only worth a very small amount, we can't accept that. So we do from time to time have to go through the condemnation process. Okay. Then we're talking about the utility relocation. Utility relocations cannot start until your right-of-way is complete. So this is the life cycle of a project stacks on top of each other. So the design's about 12 months, right-of-way acquisition is about 12 months, utility relocation is about 12 months. So we're looking at least a 3-year period typically for a roadway project, a standard arterial roadway project. So once we get to the utility relocation phase, now, as I said, this can start in the 60% design and during the design phase, and we'll start negotiating with those utilities and saying, hey, here's where we're affecting you guys. You send us some plans so we can look at them, what your proposed relocations will look like, and we start identifying that and trying to get that coordinated. But once the right-of-way is complete, we can give those utility companies notice to proceed at that point in time to start their moves. And what we run into inevitably, depending on what utility company you're talking about, and I hesitate to give examples, but there are certain utility companies, we give them notice to proceed, it won't be till 1.5 years later till it's complete. So I say 12 months plus. It really depends. We have certain utility companies that might be 1.5 years, 2 years before they get it complete. We try to foresee that and project that as best we can in our project timeline, but we don't have a tremendous amount of control over that, unfortunately. We try to coordinate with them as early ahead of time in the project as possible so that we can mitigate those problems. So. And then the coordination during construction activities, some of the overhead relocations, you have to get one utility company to move first. For instance, PSO usually needs to move before Cox and Windstream, because usually Cox and Windstream's overhead on the power poles. PSO has to move first before those two can move. So construction phase, typically on a normal arterial roadway project, it's 12 months. If I've got a project that's getting ready to start out here in Albany in front of the high school, it is run by ODOT, and they exactly 365 days is what they've put down for the construction time for that project. Now, if it was run through the city, it would be a slightly shorter duration. We have a little more control in that, but typically 365 days, 12 months is about what a roadway project costs or will take. And a little bit about the 2018 GEO bond. I'm going to specifically talk here about transportation or roadway projects. This is a list of projects that we have. We've got over 30 2018 GeoBond transportation projects which are currently either have been completed in the design process or in construction. So quite a few of them up here. We do have numerous other 2018 GeoBond projects which are underway also in our other divisions, in our stormwater, our special projects or environmental. I would encourage you, if you've got any questions about them, come on over to our table after the presentation, and if you have any questions about my projects as well, come on over to our table after the presentation. We'd be happy to talk to you about those. So with that, I'm going to open it up. If you guys have any questions about the engineering construction department, the project life cycle, any 2018 bond projects, be happy to talk to you about them. Yes, sir.
So we're very interested in 51st Street, improvements between Aspen and 161st Elm Avenue. Has that gone to the design phase? And maybe that's something we should talk to you later on specifically.
I'd be happy to talk to you about it. That is a Tulsa County project right now. It's in design. Excuse me, I apologize. I'm skipping over a mile. I'm skipping over a mile. We are looking at all options. Actually, we have a RAISE grant application that we're getting ready to turn into the federal government, requesting funding for improvements to the Aspen and Omaha intersection. So the intersection itself, we're looking at trying to get some federal funds to help with. Currently, we're looking at other alternatives for the mile roadway in between. But right now, there is no identified project. It's not identified in the 2018 bond. It could possibly be added as a future bond project in future bond issue.
So it is possible that the intersection improvements could move forward prior to the bond issue?
It's possible. I will say that if we do receive this RAISE grant that we're going to apply for, which again, it's not guaranteed, but if we do, it's going to take some time, because usually when you get federal funds tied to a project, they have a lot of strings tied to that, and what we're asking for is a planning grant, which will be up through about 60% design. Usually it'll probably take a year to even get the contract in with the federal government, and then we start design. So we're talking several years down the road. I would anticipate if we did get RAISE grant money for that intersection, that by the time the next bond project comes out, we would be about that right timeline to where we could hopefully go almost straight to construction at that point. Fingers crossed.
Part of that intersection is controlled by the city of Tulsa?
Yes, part of that intersection is controlled by the city of Tulsa, and we would have to coordinate with them. And this RAISE grant has asked the city of Tulsa for their support, and the city of Tulsa has granted that. So we would definitely be in negotiations with them to do.
So that's an acronym, RAISE?
What? Yeah, it is. So it's what it stands for is Rebuilding America's Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. That's what RAISE stands for. Every administration.
It's easier to say RAISE.
Yeah, every administration changes that name. It used to be called the Build Grant. It used to be called the Tiger Grant. It depends on which administration's in. They rename it. So they come up with a neat little acronym, and that's what that acronym stands for. So. But we're applying for it. Fingers crossed. We think we've got a really good application put together here, but there's no guarantees we're going to get it. So.